Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me to GEC. Istanbul is a beautiful city, and I'm very excited to be here. Most excited to talk to a lot of other entrepreneurs and people in the entrepreneurship space who are also very often involved in technology. And the reason that I'm talking to you today is because I'm the author of this book, The Driver and the Driverless Car, How Our Technology Choices Can Change the Future. And I actually believe very firmly that our choices can change the future, that we as a society and as people can make choices about how all of the things that we're seeing, genomics, driverless cars, autonomous vehicles, robots, can impact the way society develops. And this is incredibly important right now because all of these things are developing so fast, much faster than they have in the past. So how many of you out there feel like things are moving a little faster in life, like things are speeding up, everything is going faster, more emails, more Slacks, right? You're right. So these are adoption curves for technologies. The blue lines that you see, the dark lines, those are earlier technologies, like the telephone, the radio, air travel. You can see those lines take a little while, decades, before they really penetrated society. And then look over there on the right. The red lines, the orange lines, the yellow lines. And what you see there is you actually see lines that are going almost straight up. And that's because something comes out, it's adopted very quickly, we use it, and we change. How many of you can remember your life before the smartphone? Very good. So behind that, behind the adoption, is the far more rapid development of technology. Things are moving more quickly out of the lab, out of the fabrication facility, and out into the field. And this is really, really important for a lot of reasons. First of all, it does bring us progress. It brings us amazing capabilities. It brings us wonderful things. But it also brings us some risks. And I'm not here to talk about how to scale a startup or the wonderful things only about technology. I'm here to try to get you to think hard about some of the changes that we're seeing in technology. So we're actually at a really interesting crossroads, because at no point in time in recent history can we imagine when we faced some technologies that are truly amazing and that they could save mankind, can solve grand challenges of humanity, or could make tremendous problems for humanity, could kill many people, could create weapons that are unbelievable. And the reason that we need to think about this as a society, because not too long ago, a technology called the internet came about, and we didn't think about it too hard. How many of you have been reading what's been happening with Facebook in the last couple of months? Right. How many of you, when you first went on the internet, thought, oh, I'll just put my data on there and I'm going to think exactly what happens to it in 10 years, that my picture when I was, having a drink at a party, I'll put it on there in 20 years, I don't know where it'll be. I mean, almost nobody thought about that. Now we're starting to see what happens when we don't think hard about these kind of questions. So what's coming down the pike are technologies that are far more impactful than the internet. A good example is lots of changes in how we compute. Quantum computing. How many of you have heard about quantum computing? A little bit, yeah? So quantum computing has the potential to radically change the way that we use computers. It's so much more powerful than silicon computing that it could completely blow the doors off anything that we used to do with computers. And this could open up lots of new and interesting areas. So for example, quantum computers, in theory, could allow us to develop drugs far more quickly with far more specificity than anything we've seen in the past. It can allow us to actually simulate molecular interactions between chemicals, which is something that computers couldn't do yet. Unfortunately, quantum computing is also so powerful that it could, in theory, break any code that we use today. So all of your health records, all the financial services data, all of that could be accessed by someone with a quantum computer who's using it for the wrong purposes. So think about that for a second. All of the digital world, everything that we have, with machines that now are far more powerful than the means we use to secure it. How many of you have heard about CRISPR? Right? CRISPR is a little more exotic. CRISPR is a new gene editing technology that was developed in the United States, and it makes it so easy and simple to modify DNA that you now have people doing it as a hobby in their garage. There are people who are modifying the genes of breeds of dogs to try to make the dogs healthier. It costs less than $100 to get a CRISPR kit up and running, and you can buy them on the internet. So think about this for a second. We now have a technology that can alter the DNA of any living thing that anyone can buy. Okay. On the one hand, this can be tremendously good and powerful. We will be able to eradicate most of the genetic diseases known to mankind, and that will help millions and millions of people. And that's amazing. At the same time, we also may enter a world where you can purchase designer babies, where if you have money, you can buy children, okay? Not literally buy the children, but improve your children before they're born so that they are smarter, taller, faster. And not only will they be smarter and taller and faster, but all of their children will be too. So think about the advantage that that may give to people with money. This is why right now, as a society, we need to think about this. And as technologists and entrepreneurs, we need to think about it very deeply, because entrepreneurs are almost always the first adopters of technology. Almost always. So that was the dark things to think about. I also want to talk very briefly about why this is the best time ever to be an entrepreneur. And it truly is the best time. And this story is a tiny bit personal. So the image you see up there on the slide, that's the image of a human eye. And the little gold box, that's what's called a retinal prosthesis. It's literally a tiny computer that is inserted behind your eye that connects your eye to your brain. It's very expensive. You need a wire coming out of your head connecting to glasses and a video camera to make it work. And you can't see perfectly when you have it. But it literally takes people from darkness to light. In technology at its very best, that's what it can do. And why is this personal to me? My sister was born blind with her retinas detached. So she's never seen very well. She could see a little bit when she was tiny, and now she sees nothing. Another reason why it's the best time ever to be an entrepreneur. So this is just one chart, but it gives you a sense. You've all heard about IoT, right? Lots of people are doing it. Internet of Things, it's a huge area. This sensor cost chart shows you how much cheaper it is getting to build things for IoT. And that chart could be replicated across almost any field of technology. How much time you buy, how much you're paying for compute time on Amazon Cloud, how much your storage costs, your bandwidth costs. Everything that you need to be an entrepreneur is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And the great thing about this is, more than ever before, anyone, anywhere in the world can be an innovative technology entrepreneur. Like NASA was saying, or the astronauts before us, the barriers to space are dropping. It's not just the barriers to space, it's the barriers to just about anything. And think of how that impacts the world. How many people that formerly couldn't innovate or couldn't build great technology now can? A tremendous number. That's spectacular. So whole parts of the world that were essentially dark because their brains were not able to work on these type of problems, these grand problems, can now work on technology problems. It's not only in Silicon Valley. So I come from Silicon Valley, but more and more we recognize that the great technology being created in the world is not Silicon Valley. It's somewhere else, because that's where the problems are. What you see on the screen here is actually a product that's being developed in India called the Health Cubed. It's a small tablet-based medical diagnostic laboratory that can perform 40 diagnostic tests that are critical to people. It costs around $1,000 US. It replaces equipment that would be tens of thousands of dollars. It doesn't require a doctor. It doesn't require a nurse. Anyone can be trained to use it. For much of the world that doesn't have access to medical care, having access to a lab is a critical step. So for example, there's a condition called preeclampsia, which if you're a woman, you probably know about it. In childbirth, women with preeclampsia can bleed to death. This kit can test for preeclampsia very quickly and easily and make it super simple to diagnose cases with that and save lives. They hope to take this kit and make it work for 200 million people around the globe. So tech is starting to solve our grand challenges in really fascinating ways. What you see here is the Zipline drone. How many of you have heard of Zipline? It's an amazing technology. Zipline is the fastest drone in the world. And it's being deployed right now in Africa to deliver blood and critical medical supplies at a country scale, meaning the whole country. So think of that for a second. We're using drones in Africa to deliver drugs or medicines in 15 or 30 minutes. So why is this so important? Because one of the major causes of death in the world is accidents. And not just the accidents, but people bleeding to death afterwards. So if we can get them blood, we can give them life. This is so powerful and so interesting that it's now being moved back to the US to work in rural communities that don't have access to healthcare, that have the same problem getting blood. So the innovations that we see outside of the US are now helping us, helping the whole world. Another thing that's developing that's great for entrepreneurs is there are now more and more support systems, like GEC, that make being an entrepreneur easier and something that is more accessible to everybody, anywhere in the world. So the team you see on this slide, they're from Xavier University in New Orleans, the United States. They're about 22 years old. They're a group of engineers who entered a concept in a startup competition called the Halt Prize, which is a really interesting startup competition. How many of you have heard of the Halt Prize? A few of you? Yeah. The Halt Prize brings together tens of thousands of student businesses and lets them pitch and gain access to expertise, and hopefully, if they win, gain funding. I'm one of the regional judges. What these guys were proposing was absolutely crazy. Completely crazy. They wanted to build a tidal turbine that they would anchor off the Gulf of Guinea, off the coast of Africa, and use it to create 30% of the power for an entire country. 4 22-year-old guys. That you can see these types of people coming in is great. What's even better is at the competition, they were able to talk to someone from NASA who knew material science, who could give them advice, and who helped them move further along. So these kind of support mechanisms are now in place. They weren't before. So you remember I talked about tech is not just Silicon Valley. This is a map of unicorn companies outside the US. 10 years ago, that map would have been completely empty. There would have been nothing on it. So the fastest developing areas of technology today are outside of the US. They're out in the world where all of you live. And that's what's so exciting. You can build technology companies anywhere in the world and do amazing things. And you can build even more on the things I was talking about earlier, on artificial intelligence, on genomics, okay? On new computer platforms that will let you create new applications. They're not accessible necessarily to all of you now. You're not going to get a quantum computer for maybe 5 or 10 years, but you'll be able to access that power on the internet soon. So this is my last slide, and you remember I talked about how my sister is blind? You remember the technology on the left, the electrical implants, the retinal prosthesis? That's actually technology that's almost 20 years old. The newer versions that are coming out from a company don't even have an electronic device. They allow the nerves in your eye to grow directly onto carbon nanofibers. So think about this. Your body's extending into the electronics. They're wireless, so you don't have a wire coming out of your head, and you don't need glasses. And they can improve your vision to such a great degree that you'll probably be able to drive again and live a fairly normal life. Initially, they'll be very expensive, but because they're technology, the cost curves will happen very quickly. So it's entirely possible that before my sister dies, she'll be able to see again, and maybe very well. And so this is the promise of all of the technology of taking us from darkness to light. But because we are at that crossroad, now we have to think about this harder than ever and make sure that we focus on the light rather than the darkness, and that we make sure that the things that we are building conform with what we want to be as a society and as humanity. I want to thank you for allowing me to talk. I don't know if there's time for questions. But I also wanted to say, if you have additional questions, there's going to be a book author talk, and I'm happy to talk to any of you, answer any additional questions in the Kaufman boardroom at 11 o'clock. Do I have time for questions? Are we out? Or? Okay. Thank you very much.